This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first Legislative Coffee Series event of 2021. A special thank you to CITGO, who is today's sponsor. We are thrilled to have newly elected Senators Meg Campbell, happy birthday, Meg, and John Connor with us today. Meg and John, who would have thought the three of us St. Pat's neighborhood kids would be connecting like this some 40 years later? Oops, I think I just revealed our ages. Well, to be clear, everyone, I am the oldest of us three by many years. Thank you, Meg and John, for being with us today and being great partners with the Joliet Chamber. Back to you, Mike.
Yeah, great that you brought down 60. Well, thanks, Jen. And just a real quick reminder to everybody to make sure that your devices are on mute, whether you're on the computer or a tablet or phone today. And again, please feel free throughout the presentation to add your questions. So we'll move on now. I get to introduce who will introduce our speakers from our sponsor, CITGO, Heather Winter. Heather is going to tell us a little bit about both of our centers. Heather?
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Jen. On behalf of CITGO, I'd like to welcome everyone to our first Legislative Coffee of 2021 series. Very exciting. Hopefully everyone's Happy New Year to everyone and happy birthday to Senator. So our first guest today, State Senator Meg Campbell, began representing the 49th Senate District in December 2020 following years of shaping lives as a special education teacher and advocate. Loughran Cappell has long been dedicated to fostering inclusive environments for students to learn and thrive. She first entered the professional world as a special education teacher. In 2015, Loughran Cappell became a union representative for her school's teachers union, AFT-IFT Local 604, to support other educators and help them have meaningful careers. 2 years later, she served on the Joliet High School School Board, where she worked to improve school safety and technical problems within the district. As a Joliet native, Loughran Cappell has decided to give her life to giving back to the community that helped her shape her into the person she is today. In her free time, Loughran Cappell has often been found volunteering at her church or her children's schools. She is a member of the Joliet Chamber of Commerce, Joliet Township High School Discipline Committee, and Joliet Township High School Foundation Board, as she serves as a delegate for the Illinois Association of School Board Delegates. Her and her husband own a small business located in Shorewood, where she resides along with her 3 children. Welcome, Senator. And I will also introduce our other guest, Senator John Connor, from the 43rd District. Senator Connor was born and raised in Joliet. He previously served as state representative of the Illinois House's 85th District. He's received his BA from the University of Notre Dame and JD from the University of Illinois College of Law. He has had a 20-year career as a prosecutor at the Will County State's Attorney's Office, specializing in digital forensics and serving as a major crimes chief. John resides in Lockport with his wife, 3 sons, and dog Sears. Welcome, Senators.
Well, thank you, Heather, and thanks again to you and CITGO for helping make this session go today and for the series that we'll be presenting throughout 2021. So again, appreciation on that. And yes, thank you again, the Senators, for joining us today. We've been planning to bring this as newly elected. So as we heard, Senator Connor was formerly serving in the House of Representatives and now has moved over, and Senator Campbell is newly elected. I figured we'd start things off today by having them talk and just give a little bit more background on themselves and why they got into politics, what their plans are and interests are here for this next session and going into the future. And then we'll dive in and talk a little bit about some of the issues that came out of the lame duck session, as well as some things moving forward. maybe have them pull out their crystal balls and tell us what they think we can expect to see by the end of May. And then we'll wrap things up with your questions here today. So with that said, since it's both her birthday and she has a slight couple of weeks, I believe, of seniority in the Senate, we'll let Senator Meg Campbell go first today to tell us a little bit more about herself.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am a member of the Joliet Chamber of Commerce. I'm working on becoming a Joliet Chamber of Commerce member as well. Yeah, I am a Joliet native. Like Jen said, I grew up in Joliet. I'm a St. Pat's girl, went to Providence, became a special education teacher. Education's kind of been my passion. So I've always been involved. That's just kind of what I've always done. I have 3 children. They're almost grown. My youngest is 18, so they still live with me though. So we're still not quite empty nesters, but we're getting there. One of the reasons why I decided to kind of get into government is really the importance, I think, of having a voice at the table. And it started just by getting involved in our school systems in the area and making sure that I was an advocate for our kids and our teachers. And then when the opportunity to run for school board, I felt like that would be a great fit for me too. I mean, I think it's important to have a voice at the table. When this opened up, when Senator, now County Executive Jennifer Bertino-Tarrant moved on to County Executive, she was such an advocate for education, small businesses. Just I was really watching her in the legislature and as we moved out to Shorewood, and I was very impressed. And when she decided to move on and that spot was open, I thought, you know, this is just another opportunity for me to really be an advocate for our community and to represent the people of our district well. So I hope to do that. I hope to, again, I started trial by fire in lame duck. That was very interesting. If I didn't have one person or 100 people tell me, Meg, this is definitely trial by fire for you. So I started that way, and that's usually how I start things. Just I jump right in. I don't claim to know everything, but I am learning, and I hope to, if I cannot answer your questions today, I definitely hope to get answers for you a little bit later. But again, thank you so much for having me, and I hope to build a great rapport with the Joliet Chamber.
Well, thanks for joining us, and yes, thanks again for working on becoming a chamber member. We'll definitely be happy to add you to the list of members. Senator Cappell, do you know yet, have you had any committee assignments?
Not yet, but I am hoping to be on the education committee, state government, labor, and there's a few others. I had to make a list and pick. Those were my top 3. We'll see where I haven't gotten anything confirmed yet. Things are a little bit slower, I think, just due to COVID, and we're trying to make things safe so that we can go back, and they're working through those protocols. So as of right now, I have not heard specifically any confirmation of that, but those 3 are the ones I'd hope to be on: education, state government, and labor.
Great. Okay, good to know, definitely. And thank you again. Okay, Senator Connor, your turn to tell us a little bit more about yourself and interests, and then as well, if you have some insight on committee work.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you, Jen, as well. It's always great to be working with someone from the old May Street area of Joliet. So just like Meg said, I was Joliet born and raised, grew up on Broadway Street right down from the old Joliet Catholic High School, and spent 20 years at the state's attorney's office specializing in prosecutions involving digital forensics and digital evidence, which that led to me getting involved in the Drew Peterson case, which led to me being the major crimes chief at the state's attorney's office. So, basically had a career in prosecutions. And one of the things that happens kind of at the courthouse, if you're there all the time, is oftentimes, judges are tasked with interpreting the legislation. And so you will get kind of a lot of feedback on opinions on particular pieces of legislation and what judges think. And of course, everybody kind of comments on, we have kind of a joke around the courthouse, the infinite wisdom of the legislature. So, being subject to that at some point, I thought, well, rather than simply commenting from no experience, I thought, well, why don't I give it a try, see what the legislature really is like, and then at least when I express my opinions, I'll be a little bit more informed having gone through it. And that was, so when my state representative resigned, I stepped in and decided to give Springfield a try. And it certainly has been an education over the last 3 years. And you know, you learn both good things and things turn out to be sometimes worse than you thought, and then sometimes a lot better than are portrayed. So it's definitely been an interesting experience. One of the main reasons that I got involved was I felt like politics was coarsening. I know that, you know, people have kind of talked about the coarsening of our entire process here in the U.S. And so I thought, well, rather than what's that old saying, you know, better to light a candle than curse the darkness. So I thought I'll get in and see if I'm able to improve things in any way. So it's been an experience, but these types of things, and that's why I really want to thank Mike for keeping in touch with the legislators, giving us an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about the things that are going on. This really makes a difference because the less we talk, the worse things get. And so I just, again, want to thank Jen and Mike for putting this together and for keeping in touch with us as legislators. So hope I didn't go too long with that intro. Thanks.
Perfect timing. And yes, it's mutual. We appreciate your constant communication with us. I know specifically Senator Connor has started off and has opened some doors and kept us in touch with IDPH and the governor's office on some continuing issues. So we do always appreciate that open dialogue and constant communication. And I've always said over the years that we may not always agree on issues, but I think the best thing is to appreciate the honesty and the open communication. So thank you again for that. And I'm certain, 100% certain that Senator Cappell will be there for that as well. So we decided we're going to kind of break things down into 3 sections and go over some of the issues that occurred in the lame duck session, as well as what can come here in the future, and then touch a little bit maybe on our phases and vaccine situation in the state if we have time. So we're just going to kind of keep things open and dialogue flowing here. I'm going to start off with some topics, and I'll just invite either one of you to jump in and say what you wish. You don't have to go in any specific order, but we'll start things off with probably what has gotten the most attention, I think, out of the lame duck session. And that was 4 issues that the Black Caucus was working on. I think the biggest one is the criminal justice and the police pillar that came through there. So it seems that there's probably about 2 or 3 things that stick out with that. I think body cameras, as well as the eventual elimination of cash bail here in 2023. And then there was some other language in there that updates the process on the ability for people to file complaints against officers. So again, it's gotten a lot of press. You know, whatever side you're on there's certainly issues that definitely needed to be brought up and talked about. So would both of you like to go into those a little bit further and your thoughts on them?
Sure. And you know what, Mike, I'll kind of start with this one for a couple of reasons. First of all, I just want to explain to the chamber. So I was COVID positive in early January, and unfortunately, my quarantine extended past the time of the lame duck session. So I was not involved in any of the processes. Anyone who's ever been in the legislature can tell you, if you're not there, you're simply completely disconnected. So I had a lot of phone calls with people at that time, and I attempted to stay in communication. But the bottom line is that if people know you can't vote because you're COVID positive, you're not going to be included in the loop on any of the discussions because there's no point. You're not going to be voting. You're not going to be entering a vote on the issue. So I was disconnected from that point, but obviously this is an area that I'm highly familiar with. So I did contact the sponsors, and I basically let them know that the concerns that I was receiving, and what I told all the police chiefs, anyone else connected with law enforcement who was contacting me, as I said, there are a number of items in this bill. I need you to prioritize your top 3 issues and get those to me. And so the top 3 issues given to me, basically in order of importance by the people in law enforcement that I spoke to, were qualified immunity, collective bargaining, and then there's kind of a split whether it was anonymous complaints or body cams as far as kind of the third in terms of priority. So I communicated those to the sponsor, basically indicating, hey, I'm not going to be down there to vote, but this is what my law enforcement community is expressing to me in terms of their problems with this bill moving forward. And I would really appreciate it if these items could be either taken out or modified in some way to make this bill, better for, or at least take some of these really problematic items out for law enforcement. In the final version of the bill, qualified immunity was changed significantly to the point where it was basically a review committee to take a look at the issue. Collective bargaining, that language changed considerably between January 5th and the final version, which dropped on the morning of the 13th. And then anonymous complaints was kind of still in, but the body cams, the time that was given to the police departments in order to implement them was extended on that basis. So although I did not vote on the bill, what I was really happy about is that the concerns that were expressed to me by law enforcement were taken into consideration by the bill sponsors, and those changes were made. Was it an ideal bill that emerged? I don't know how much of the legislation that we actually work on, because extensive compromise is involved, ends up being a perfect piece of legislation. But under these circumstances, I think you have to be happy if you bring up 3 concerns, and those 3 concerns are basically dealt with. So under the circumstances, everything that was in that bill to one degree or another was controversial. So I was just happy that the top 3 that I had the most problems with were modified in response. So now Senator Cappell was actually down there. She was really in the middle of things. So I'm sure she can talk about some of the things that were going on in terms of the discussions in Springfield.
Yes, I do want to actually kind of mimic the same thing. As a new freshman senator coming in January, I really wasn't a part of a lot of the hearings that they had prior. I came in December, and then we had the holidays, and then next thing you know, I'm down there looking at legislation. And to Senator Connor's point, it did change a great deal. However, in my district, I had hundreds of calls to the office about qualified immunity, collective bargaining issues as well. And also cash bail was a big thing I was hearing about too. And so by the time I had gotten the bill, there were things that supposedly were changed in it, but it was 4 in the morning. And I just felt like I didn't have enough stakeholder involvement and enough knowledge of the process to, put a seal on that, considering all my constituent phone calls. So yes, it passed even without my vote on that. And it did eventually change those things. I have talked to several police chiefs, and I've heard things like, Meg, 70 to 75% of this we already do. There are some things that we would like to change. And, I don't think it was a perfect piece of legislation. I think there are some things that could possibly change during that, period where we're going to be implementing like some changes. So I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's 100% done. And I think we still need to do some work. But again, I was brand new, and considering all my constituent phone calls, I just didn't feel like it was something that I could put my approval on as an advocate for my own specific district. So, so moving forward, hopefully we can kind of, get things to where there's a place where people can be okay with most of it. So, but there was a lot of good in it as well. But we'll see, right? We have to just keep moving forward with that.
And I just wanted to add real quick, Mike. So there were about 30 plus hours of hearings in summer and fall on the quote unquote pillars, the goals of some of the criminal justice reform legislation. And in the meetings that I was in, representatives from the Illinois Chiefs of Police Association were present, representatives from the Illinois Sheriff's Association were present, FOP, other police officer unions. Not everyone at every meeting, or at every hearing, but definitely there was a lot of discussion, some of it very heated during those hearings, but there was a lot of discussion during that time. Unfortunately, in the end, we did not have a veto session. So we lost 2 weeks where we could have argued, made other changes, et cetera, because that was canceled. And, that was really unfortunate. That's what made lame duck the process so much more compressed. So, but 30 hours is that's a fairly significant chunk of hearings, even on a big bill. So I think we definitely covered a lot of the issues in summer and fall on that pillar.
Okay, great. Anything that you can add on the other pillars? So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the healthcare portions did not pass, but the education portion did, as well as the economic equity portion. And I know that one's got a couple of different points, that we had our eye on. One of them being it makes the use of criminal background checks. So it's now would be a civil rights violation if an employer used a conviction record for the basis to not hire somebody unless there's substantial, I think it says a substantial relationship between the offense and the position that they'd be hiring for. And then the other thing in that bill that is worth noting too is it does some things as far as Equal Pay Act and certification for employers of a certain size to make sure that they're certifying and writing down, recording different wages and diversity in that. Anything that you can expand on for us on that bill, and if you want to talk to about the education and healthcare?
Like, I'll briefly talk about education since that kind of my thing. So the education pillar, again, was one that started and changed quite a bit from where it began to the final product. And again, no piece of legislation is perfect, but I felt as an educator that there was a lot of compromise, a lot of stakeholder involvement in that bill, to where I felt very confident that it was a decent piece of legislation. It improves conditions for minorities and low-income families, and as you well know, like I was a teacher on the east side of Joliet at Sanchez and a school board member at Joliet Township High School, where we had high levels of just kids on free and reduced lunch, and it's a very diverse community. So I felt like that was something that was important and was good. So it also expands our graduation requirements, and there is a little bit of some conversation going on about that in some respects that we're still working through. I don't know what that's going to look like in a couple of years, but again, it was still something just to make sure that our kids had opportunity right out of high school to go into higher level education. It improves our curriculums to teach more about like minority groups and civil rights, and it gives scholarships for minority teachers. And again, it's really important. It does a lot for our early childhood, special education and early childhood education through kind of pouring or adding some resources to that so that our kids can get a good start in education. So I was very comfortable with that. I felt like, while again, that the people that were working through that made the necessary changes to make sure that teachers and principals and superintendents and administrators all had some input, and that was the final version. So I was very pleased with that piece of legislation.
And Mike, I can just talk briefly about the background checks, because this is a subject that we discussed extensively in the legislature during different times when I was a state representative, and then obviously, although I wasn't part of the discussions on this particular set of packages, back when I was with the state's attorney's office, when I first got up onto the felony floor, the courtroom that I was in, it was Judge White's call at that time, they handled expungements, and now it's both expungements and sealings. Illinois has made it easier to take care of your records, but I can tell you that some of the saddest times where I was up on that floor, I would have a nurse come in or someone who was working at the nuke plants, and they would be attempting to get something, because somebody had a bag of of weed back in Cook County Forest Preserve, 15, 20 years ago, and they could not get security clearance, or they could not get their nurse's license up to the next level because of this prior problem. And at that time, when I was on that floor, the expungement laws in Illinois were very difficult. If you had any form of conviction, even on a misdemeanor, you could not get that taken off of your record. So for these people, I basically often had to tell them, well, I'm sorry, I know you're trying to make things better for your family, but guess you shouldn't have smoked weed back in the Cook County Forest Preserve 20 years ago. And that's not a position that we really want to be in, when people are trying to make life better for themselves and their families. And unfortunately, the computer systems involved have problems. Many of them haven't been upgraded. When I was at the state's attorney's office, I was often advocating, hey, we need to invest more in the software. We need to upgrade things so that these systems aren't so problematic when there's bad data in them, or when, even in my private practice, I've had people come in and ask for expungements on cases that really shouldn't even, that are incorrectly listed, where whatever happened in court is not accurately reflected in their criminal history. So to a certain degree, we're trying to make progress towards that. Obviously, everyone wants to know a criminal history when you're attempting to hire someone, but we've had so many problems with that system. And obviously that's something that we can tweak now in the 102nd when we go back down to Springfield. But there's a lot of, I just wanted to explain some of the pressure that's coming from, making these rules a little more, I guess, pro-employee. And those are some of the pressures involved in those situations.
Okay, well, thank you both for expanding on both of those topics. Two other topics, I'm going to kind of mesh them together of things that did not go through during the lame duck session, was virtual voting, as well as any changes with mail-in ballots. So I know virtual voting, the Senate, you're able to meet in committee, but not vote. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the House, you're not able to do either, meet virtually in committee or vote at all. And I know we've got a question in the chat box already that talks about the recent announcement of the House to only meet on the 10th, and looks like they're going to cancel the rest of session dates in February. I believe I heard the Senate, you guys are going to be there on the 9th of February and are uncertain past then. I know we've got the governor's State of the State and budget combined on the 17th of February. So any ideas on that? Is that something that can get done quickly when you do go back to progress that further and open that process up? Or is that just something that's going to continue as is and just hope that the numbers get better and that in the very near future you'll be able to reconvene in person?
And you know what, I'll kind of jump in real quick on this one, Mike, because I was part of the group that put together, Ann Williams, put together remote legislating language and then filed it as a bill. Unfortunately, it did not make it up during lame duck. But I expect that is going to be dealt with. It should be pretty quick. We voted last May when we had our compressed session. We voted on remote legislating. I voted for it. Unfortunately, there was a lot of concern from the Springfield area legislators, and I think it was kind of a camel's nose in the tent argument of, well, what if we just go to complete remote legislating one day, then no one will live in Springfield anymore, and that type of thing. So there were a lot of concerns that were brought up that I don't necessarily believe, we're actually dealing with the remote legislating package that was put forth, because it was very limited. What we want to be able to do is committee votes. No one's really discussed full floor votes being remote, but the committee work is what leads up to those floor votes. And if we can get that done without requiring us to be present, it will certainly make us more efficient as a legislature. So I've been pushing this since I got in. I was disappointed we didn't have something in place, obviously before the pandemic hit, but I think it is going to get taken care of. And I believe that the House side rules will be very close to the Senate side rules, which do permit remote committees. And as long as you have a certain number of senators present physically you can vote on items, and I think that is the way that it should be. I would be in favor of even more, remote capabilities. Some people have some constitutional concerns with that, but to me, the idea that in a pandemic we can't legislate is, seems absurd, frankly. So.
Right, and I know that during the lame duck session, we had a couple senators who were voting on the floor from home. So they just were virtually there and they would come up on the screen. So again, as long as we have a certain amount there, but those that are high risk, they're able to kind of vote, remotely. And I think the Senate has like Senator Connor said, I think we've got a good way to do it. Although we are a little bit smaller than the House, I think they have a little bit more to deal with in terms of the numbers of people. And I think they're working through that. But yeah, I just to reiterate, that was done during lame duck, and we continue to do that. So.
That's good to hear. We definitely want to see that the process continues and that happens hopefully as quickly as possible. Just real quick before we move on, any notion, if anything, will come in the session to continue on the mail by ballot, that whole process? I think two of the bigger issues were making sure that there's available absentee drop boxes, as well as instituting some type of, I heard, curbside voting process. Do you foresee that coming up and going forward?
Well, it wasn't. I know that in the Senate we voted on that, and it did not take up the concurrence in the House. So, but yeah, all those things that you said are in that. And a lot of it came from input that the state was having from county clerks and people working in the county clerk's office that just had some concerns about, they weren't comfortable with mailing in their ballots. They wanted more drop boxes. Some weren't sure that about putting stamps on them. Others were, it was just, there was a lot of confusion there. So this just kind of clarified that a little bit. But again, the House did not take up the concurrence in that. So. And I'm not sure what the House is going to do. Maybe Senator Connor can speak to that since he knows more people there than me.
Yeah, that was not a big area of discussion for me, unfortunately. So my crystal ball is not really working on that. I'm assuming they will clarify those issues that were brought up by the county clerks, including curbside voting. So.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll move on to the last topic here before we get into some more future predictions. But I think one of the things that we were adamantly against that came up kind of, I think, late in the game, is especially compared to other states that tackled this measure back in April and May, was the tax decoupling, and that came out of the CARES Act about 10, 11 months ago. The governor, we kept hearing that changed from, I think, half $500 million to then it became $1 billion that could be pumped in and aided with state finances here. But basically it was a tax change that was set up to help companies that experience loss. And of course, the majority of our members are small members, and this was definitely going to be much needed relief for a good number of them. Good news was it did not progress, and there are rumblings that it will definitely come up here again in session. I know there was an article the other day that said the finances for the state aren't as bad as they were originally predicted to be, so that's a good thing. And we've got a survey right now out to our members, and it's very optimistic going forward with the answers of what they feel the economy is going to look like. So can you talk a little bit on your thoughts as far as that coming back up again and progressing forward?
I'm sorry, Meg, I was going to defer to you. You were down in the middle of the discussions on that one. So.
Yeah, we just didn't take that one. It failed the House, and we didn't get a chance to vote on it. And I have not heard. I know that we will be starting, more of our committee sessions and I think we have a caucus coming up this next week. That'll probably be brought up then, but I do not have any answers for you on that. I'm sorry. But as soon as I do, how about I let you know, Mike? How about that?
Perfect. We've got our eye on it, and that one won't escape the near view. So we'll definitely keep in touch on that. I can promise you on that one. Okay, so let's move on then to a couple of issues then going forward. One of the big things that came up has been out there for years, actually, and chambers have always been involved in it, is the fair maps and redistricting. And now, we're done with census. There's a report out a couple of days ago that there's a delay in the census reporting. I think they said don't expect a final report anytime, I believe it was before the end of July. Which kind of throws a wrench into some plans. We've heard the governor, he campaigned and said that he wanted to support fair remapping. And I believe new Speaker Welsh echoed those statements, saying that would also support nothing but a fair remap. So can you talk a little bit more on that, the process, if you know how that timeline is going to work out with the delay from the census, and your thoughts on the mapping process?
But yeah, I think that the delay is definitely that is not going to make anybody's job easier, because we have to have this in place, by June. So it's that's definitely, it's going to make it more difficult than it has been in years past, where those census results came in early. And it's fair maps has been discussed since I've obviously even well before I was in the legislature. Nothing has made its way to the floor, at least of the House. Certainly, I believe that this year we have a chance for something to get to the floor of the House in perhaps a way that wasn't possible before. So it's definitely going to be interesting seeing that develop. But really, not having those census results, I think, is going to be problematic to the process. So I'm hopeful we'll be able to kind of get everything done, but it certainly would be nice to have that census data early. So
I have nothing to add here to that, except I know I have heard that our response rate was pretty good in Will County. So that's going to be very important for a lot of our underrepresented groups. So it's not all in yet. So we'll find out as things move forward.
Right. Yeah, we're interested to see how many congressional seats we'll end up losing. I know kind of segue into the next thing, and then that's the budget. So, there's all kinds of numbers out there as far as bill backlog and our pension obligation. Reports out that we've lost over 420,000 jobs in 2020. Illinois saw the second largest population exit, I believe 80,000 people in 2020. So I don't think anybody would argue that there are issues that are facing our state. There's some big decisions to be made on that, and how we're going to, plug the holes right now in the current budget. But then what's the next fiscal year budget going to look like? So again, with that crystal ball in front of you, how are we going to move forward here and make sure that I know taxes are mentioned a lot, as you all know. We fought hard against the progressive tax and have always said that we don't believe increased revenue has to always come from taxes and income taxes. So if you can share your thoughts on that subject.
Well, yeah, that's the 800-pound gorilla that's always been in the room in Illinois. So, we have a long bipartisan history of can kicking that went on in the legislature, pension holidays, short shrifting the pension funds. And so that really doesn't help us when it comes to having to pay interest payments and debt service payments on money that we have to borrow to, make those payments now. So it is difficult coming in and trying to make up for 30 odd years of basically kind of ignoring a problem. So and this year's budget is obviously COVID-19 specific. So we're going to have to take some measures. We borrowed last year. We may have to borrow again this year in order to meet our budget obligations. My biggest concern is we don't short shrift the pension payments anymore. Had that not been done during the last 30 years, we'd be in a completely different situation right now. Wouldn't have any of these issues. We might be like Minnesota with a surplus, but I can't go back in time and change that. So I have to deal with the reality on the ground that we have now. So it is good to find out that the shortfall is not going to be quite as bad as we thought, but that's no cause. If we went from a $2 billion shortfall to a $1 billion shortfall, we're still going to have to make a lot of really difficult decisions. I think usually as a legislature, what I've seen is when we have to do it, we don't play favorites. It's an across the board cut. The expression, everybody gets a haircut. You know, find 6% in your agency budget, and you just have to cut it. And you know, so obviously that's going to result in reduced services and other issues. But you know, we're going to everybody in the executive branch agencies, and then obviously you know, and as well, you know, in the legislature, we're all going to have to take a haircut, as the expression goes. And you know, we'll see how things go. It would be nice to find other sources of revenue other than taxpayer money, Mike. You know, any ideas you have in that regard, boy, I'd really love to hear them, because occasionally it sounds like, you know, spinning straw, gold from straw. But yeah, we certainly have been, you know, there are big issues that we have kind of ignored previously. I am hopeful that this year there may be a big pension bill that starts to implement a solution that's, you know, that's actually viable and that's not nibbling around the edges anymore. But that's going to require a lot of arm twisting, would be my guess, in order to really come up with a solution. So one of the stories that I heard when I first came in was about what was called the grand bargain. And you know, it sounded like a lot of these issues had been worked out and that there was a solution that was going to take place. And then there was, you know, some personality involvement, and then that all kind of went down the tubes. I really wish that had gone into place, you know, because I think we'd be in a better position today. And so what we need are people who, when they, you know, when they make a compromise, they stick with it. They don't back out. They don't chisel. They don't try to change things at the last minute. And I'm hopeful that moving forward, the group that we have is going to be able to actually tackle some of those big issues.
Okay, yeah, I think the majority probably of people joining us today. I know there's one comment in the chat box here that, you know, pension reform would definitely be a good place to start. So hopefully this will be the session that we'll see some true movement there. Okay, I see that we're about 1:45, so I want to throw one more topic out there, and then we'll again remind everybody, invite everyone to utilize the chat box for questions. I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, oh, it looks like Kelly just left us, so we'll circle back to that. But just if you could, anything to share knowledge as far as the phases in vaccines. As our members know, we've kept up to date on that and have you know, shared as much information, make sure everybody's updated with that. I guess two things, and maybe just more comments than questions, are you know, progressing forward, seeing what phase 5 looks like. That's one of our big questions. You know, will one day we just go from capacity of 50 people for gatherings or in places of business to just complete openness like it was 2019? Or, you know, does it make sense to start allowing, as we have more people vaccinated and the positivity rate drops, you know, to start ramping that 50 number up to say 100, and then maybe a month later or weeks later, 150 to 200. Again, thanks Senator Connor for helping us with dialogue there. We heard from IDPH that as of right now, they're in the monitoring phase. And of course, you know, they will continue to look at that and make decisions as they come up. But and then just any ideas and thoughts you can share with us as far as the vaccination process goes. There's obviously a lot that's going on locally and in the state and nationally with that. But I think one of the biggest questions that we see in the horizon is, as we progress forward, I know we're still just wrapping up 1A and 1B, but for a lot of our owners and their workers, you know, they're looking for plans down the road for 1C and phase 2. Hopefully that'll come sooner rather than later. Anything that you can shed light on those subjects?
Well, first of all, for I think the thing in terms of vaccines, I know that Senate Democratic Caucus did send a letter to the governor's office, to IDPH, and just this is kind of the same questions that you have. I think the frustrating part for a lot of us is that sometimes we get the same information around the same time you do when decisions are made. At least for me as a new freshman senator, that's kind of where I've been. So we're constantly trying to find ways to make sure that we're getting those vaccines to in conversations with the Will County Health Department, Will County government. So that's just, I think the whole problem is that federally we don't have enough vaccinations, and it's just kind of trickling down. But I do think there are some things that we can do to streamline, how vaccinations are being rolled out. And I think that there's something that we could do to fix that. But sometimes we don't get that information as quickly as we would like as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there for me personally, because I have been in, and I know that Kendall County had asked for 20,000 more vaccinations. I just sent a letter to the governor about that. I'm hoping we can do something, but it seems to be one of those situations where as they trickle in, then we get the information as well. So I think I'm sensing frustration, at least on my end as well.
Yeah, I haven't had a whole lot of, I have to say, I haven't had a whole lot of constituent questions on vaccines, but I don't think that's necessarily because the rollout's going swimmingly. I think it's just more of that would have been directed at the Will County Health Department and other, local agencies that would be responsible for actually getting the vaccine into someone's arm. From what I've heard, there were some hiccups on website surveys. I believe that's been worked out or is in the process of being worked out. And, one of the problems you have, especially with the Pfizer vaccine, is you have to store it at this temperature. And then obviously once you thaw it, you're limited. And so I've heard some stories that are, less than ideal, about, people being called to get a vaccine because a certain amount has been thawed, and then some of the people who were scheduled for it have changed their minds, they're not getting it, et cetera. And so they have a limited opportunity in order to get that vaccine into someone's arms. So logistically, obviously I think that temperature issue with the Pfizer vaccines, creates a bit of an issue as to how to make sure that you do it in the most efficient manner. But I think things are obviously going to continue to get better, and we need a more consistent supply. Obviously, the vaccines themselves, and then you have to get those, into the arms. So it does seem as though things are improving. Would have been a little better to have maybe a more consistent national plan in place long before now. But you play with the cards you're dealt, and so now it's trying to get them into people's arms. And I think we're going to see a continued increase in that happening in Will County, but we got some catching up to do.
Okay, very good. Thank you on that. So we do have a couple of questions, a few that were pre-submitted and one in the chat box here. So I'll ask you this one from the chat box first. So it says, according to the Board of Higher Education, Illinois has cut higher education funding in half since fiscal year 2002. This has led to a greater reliance on tuition and property taxes for operational funding. A steady funding stream from the state continues to support colleges without increasing tuition. What are your predictions on the state's budget direction to at least support flat funding for higher education?
Yeah, that is something I also would contribute to why a lot of families leave. I've always said that we haven't funded higher education for 20 years. I know the last couple of years we did until now we're having some budgetary issues. I can't predict what's going to happen. I'd like to see funding continue through higher ed. I think what ends up happening is because of it's less expensive for our kids to go outside of the state. They stay there, they get their jobs in other states, and then when mom and dad see that their grandkids are being born, they move out and they retire and they move out to the other states as well. And I think that is, to me, one of the contributing factors to why families leave the state of Illinois. I look at higher education as an investment. I even look at other technical training and, career technical training outside of high school as a way to invest in our state. And I personally want to make sure that we continue to fund education and higher education. That's a priority for me. I will advocate for that. I can't guarantee what that's going to look like, but I hear you wholeheartedly, and I am right there with you. We need to fund education. To me, it's an investment in our state and in our future leaders. So
I'm going to echo some of what Senator Cappell said. Many families have told me that the reason that they're leaving is because there's cheaper college elsewhere. And that is a direct result of a decision on the part of the legislature not to fund higher ed adequately. Senator McGuire, my predecessor, who I shared an office with, fought tooth and nail to try to make sure that our higher ed institutions statewide were funded, because he knew, part of the reason why people were leaving or sending their children to college out of state, where they're less likely to come back and live in Illinois, because we haven't given them any assistance in terms of their children's higher education. So I think that was obviously a huge strategic blunder on the part of the legislature before to short shrift higher ed and make a lot of cuts there, because that's how we get young people to come here and keep our economy going and be the educated workforce that we need for the 21st century. So so I agree. I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that higher ed is no longer a target for all these cuts and bearing a disproportionate amount of cuts relative to the services they provide and the future that they provide for Illinoisans. Mike, you're muted.
Had to do it once during the hour. So in the chat box, we've got another question here from Pam, and it was about how are you planning to deal with the state budget crisis? But then a second part to that question is about how do you deal with receiving ideas and suggestions from your constituents? Maybe you can talk to further about how that process works and how you do intake ideas and how you move them forward.
I'm always open to ideas. I think sometimes that's where we get our best ideas, is from our constituents. So anybody that has, I know that we do have like virtual hearings and we try to keep things open and transparent, but if you have any ideas for bills or even for some of our committees, you can just contact my office, and I can give you that information. I'm setting up my office. It's been a little bit slower due to COVID to get my utilities on. But so if you need to call me, it's 217-782-0052. You can look at my website, senatorloughrancappell.com. And I have a newsletter. You can actually get information about what's going on with me as well. But I'm the education person, so I know a lot about that. But if there are things going on in the community that and ideas, I want to hear them so that I can take them to the appropriate people and make sure that maybe we can turn that into some legislation. I think those ideas are best do come from our constituents. The other thing too I want to tell you is the local number will stay the same eventually, and I think it's getting turned on next week. And that is 815-254-4211. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I'm definitely open. I very much enjoy having conversations with constituents where they give me ideas. Unfortunately, a lot of times, and I'm going to address this for instance, to Kevin O'Keefe's suggestion, in the chat box. Thank you for that, Kevin. Obviously, pension reform has been a big discussion. A lot of people have misconceptions about, what we can actually do. One of the things we have in Illinois is a constitutional amendment that considers pensions as a contract that cannot be modified. There have been at least 3, I believe, Supreme Court opinions that uphold that. So let's say tomorrow we ran a constitutional amendment that wiped that particular protection out. That would not affect anyone who currently has a pension here in Illinois. So what you're dealing with is perhaps a future course. but you're still not going to solve the existing problem, which is people who are already vested and in the state pension system. And there's nothing that we can do by way of pension reform that's going to affect those people already in the system. What we can do is change things moving forward. But a lot of people have this idea that, that somehow a constitutional amendment is going to wave a magic wand and solve the problem, and it's not. That definitely, could give us some more options on the table, but we have to be realistic about the situation that we're in, and we can't talk about unconstitutional or illegal solutions that aren't really solutions at all, because they're going to get struck down immediately. So, and that's part of the problem when people oftentimes they make suggestions, and you have to analyze it from the perspective of what's constitutional, what's legal, what will actually stand up in court, those types of things. And that, obviously, oftentimes people are disappointed to hear that, their suggested solution may not do what they think that it's going to do. But that's part of our job as legislators, is to educate people. Here are the solutions that are available to us. Oftentimes it's a choice of don't like, hate, or really can't stand in terms of the solutions, and you have to pick one of those to move forward. And that's the nature of compromise. Everybody walks away a little bit unhappy. So it's a difficult process, but I love the suggestions.
Well, we've got a handful of them that we'll be sending both your ways here within the next couple of weeks on different topics like liability protection and workers' comp insurance, and some business tax credits, and some other fun topics. So we'll certainly take you up on those offers. We would urge our chamber members to do the same. I want to thank you both. We're about 2 minutes before 2 o'clock. So thank you both for all of the information that you shared today. It's definitely a wealth of knowledge, and we look forward to great working relationship with the both of you going forward. So I will, if you have any parting comments, you feel free to make them, and afterwards, or if not, I'll turn it over to Jen for any closing remarks to wrap us up today.
Just to thank everyone again for having me, and Senator Connor as well. And please reach out to my office if you have any ideas or want to talk. I want to be available. I have people calling me all the time. I love having conversations, like Senator Connor said. So I just encourage you, there are things that you are experts in that I am not. And I would like to hear about your expertise and things that you think might work for state government.
I'd like to echo that, and again, to thank you, Mike, for being so communicative on behalf of your member businesses in the chamber, and for forwarding those questions on, particularly even when it's on difficult subjects like the restrictions that were put in place for COVID-19. That's the most important time to not have communication break down, is when things are kind of the most difficult. So Jen, want to thank you and Mike both for setting this up. This was really fantastic, and I want to encourage other chamber members. If you want me to come and talk, or I'm sure Senator Cappell is the same way. If you want us to come and address a group or something like that, please get in touch with our office and send the questions our way. I'll do my best to answer, and I'll ask somebody who does know the answer if I don't have it, and I'm sure Senator Cappell would be the same. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Meg and John. And again, thanks for being such a great partner, and we look forward to working with you in the future. We appreciate your openness and your availability and transparency. That means a lot to us and our membership. And maybe one of these coffee series, we can sit back and talk about the old neighborhood. And Meg, have a great birthday today. And John, you have a great birthday tomorrow. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Jen. Yeah.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.